Hey everybody, this is chapter 10 in our textbook Introduction to Fire Protection and Emergency Services. In case you haven't noticed, I cannot remember the name to the textbook, but that's what it is. Chapter 10, Fire Prevention. Those of you that might know me or know a little bit about me know that fire prevention was always a major focus of mine. I believe that it's the best way that we can keep people safe. I believe it's the best way that we can meet our mission, serve our communities, and take care of people. I'm not so naive to think that we can prevent all fires, but I believe that we can go great distances to prevent the catastrophes, the fire deaths, and a lot of fires as well. So one of the areas that is tasked with that in the fire department is the Fire Prevention Bureau or the Community Risk Reduction Office or whatever your department might call it. Unfortunately, many departments don't call it anything because they don't have one. It seems to be an area that has been underserved throughout the history of the fire service. As you know, the fire service has been very reactive and not as proactive in preventing fires as we should have been. I believe over my career, I have begun to see that turn around a bit. It's a slow process. We know that anything in any change within the fire service is slow, but I believe that we will see more and more focus on fire prevention, on risk reduction, mitigation, those kinds of things, and hopefully a little bit less on suppression, not for any other reason except prevention is the better way to keep people safe. You'll learn some more about that later in your programs. There's a whole course on community risk reduction. There's another course about fire prevention. So we just kind of want to hit the highlights in this lecture. Again, take the time to read the text, go through the PowerPoints with the text. It's going to kind of give you an overview of the chapter at this point. The United States has one of the highest fire death rates in the country, or in the world, and Georgia is what I was thinking about, has one of the highest fire deaths rates in the country. There is right now a task force, the Fire Prevention Task Force, that was started by the Georgia Fire Chiefs Association in conjunction with the State Fire Marshal's Office here in Georgia. And there's some folks that are working very hard to try to curb that. Last year in Georgia, there was 147 fire deaths, which is the most I can remember in a very, very, very long time throughout. And I've been doing this for 25 years. So it's huge. It's huge. A study, research that has been conducted by the Department of Homeland Security has shown that for every dollar spent on prevention, $4 to $7 could be saved in responding to incidents. So it's a much more economical way to conduct ourselves, to conduct business. In many ways, our fire prevention codes tend to be reactive and not proactive. If you remember, I think in this, I get my courses confused, but either for myself or for Captain Kearns, you had to research a fire, in a historical fire. If you haven't done that, you will. And you'll find that all of these fires, there is, we see codes afterwards. Fires such as Coconut Grove, Country Club, Supper Club, the Beverly Hills Supper Club. The Coconut Grove was a nightclub. That was in 1942. Beverly Hills Supper Club, you'll learn more about that too. A very sad fire. All fires where people die are sad, but this one, I don't know, it tugs at my heart a little bit more. The Happy Land Fire, I believe that was in Mississippi. I can't remember, it was either Mississippi or New York. I don't know why I can't remember which one or the other. And of course, more recently, the Station nightclub, where lots of different things came about. People wanted to leave the same way they came in. It was as easy as that. And even more recently, we have these towers fires, the high rises in Dubai, the one in Hawaii. And I think there was another one recent. I think I just read today where the one in Hawaii, they don't know that the damage was so extensive and that they were unable to even determine a point of origin. So it is part of our job to reduce injuries, deaths, and property loss. And a famous fire chief said one time, when we leave the station to go on a call, we have failed in that mission. So I'll leave it at that. As you can see, I'm very passionate about the whole concept of prevention. It is one of the least favorable and least recognized jobs in the department. It's often been thought of as those for the weak and the disabled and the lame and light duty and old, and if it's going to be effective, it shouldn't be for those people. Those people should be those that work in the area should be very energetic and take their job very, very seriously. That division, that area of the department is certainly a very important one. Many times employees are assigned to the Fire Prevention Bureau. These are our inspectors, our investigators may be a part of that, our educators, our plans review people, the people that we may have already talked about a little bit in this course. Usually they fall under that umbrella of the Fire Prevention Bureau or the Fire Marshal's office or whatever you want to call it. As I said, it has lots of different names now. But there is specialized training that goes along with each of those roles and responsibilities. So certainly a fire inspector has to understand, fire prevention inspections, has to understand enforcement, codes and more codes. Codes change all the time. And so you really have to stay on top of that. Has to have that knowledge in chemistry and electricity and building construction and all of that so that they can recognize that hazard when they see it. Then they also have to have that piece of customer service where they are willing to work with the building owner. They have to be cordial. They have to be, they have to make people want to be compliant with the codes and regulations. They may have to be a little bit forceful in that job as well. So your book refers to it as salesmanship. And I think that that's probably a great way to put that. So in some departments, that inspector may be assigned to shift operations. They may be on an engine company, and so they do inspections by day, but also respond to fires as well. Even if you are not an inspector by title, you are an inspector. If you work at the fire department, you should always be on the lookout for hazards. You should know what that hazard looks like. You should know what the codes are to, you don't have to know them like perfectly, but when somebody asks you a question, to be able to answer that question or to refer them to the right place to get that answer. So a lot of times in different places, of course, the size of the Prevention Bureau is the size of the jurisdiction dictates the size of the Prevention Bureau. Think about places like the city of Atlanta. They have a huge inspections division, a prevention division. And so they also have to be familiar with, when I think about it from my standpoint, they have to be familiar with certainly like the arenas, the baseball fields, not so much anymore, but things like Mercedes-Benz Stadium that's brand new, all those kinds of things. Usually there's a chief of the fire prevention division. It may not be a chief by title. It might be a deputy chief or a captain. That person might be the local fire marshal. In some communities that are large enough, they have their own fire marshal that's blessed by the state fire marshal and serves as that local fire marshal and has all the power and authority that the state fire marshal does in that area. In other jurisdictions that are smaller, the state fire marshals, the deputy state fire marshal, I guess, covers that area and provides the inspection services. Of course, they're anyone, such as at the fire department level, could call on that state fire marshal. But usually, when you look at the fire prevention hierarchy within a state, those state fire marshals, they're within their own jurisdiction, but they also have a responsibility of dealing with, reporting to, and conferring with the state fire marshal or his or her representative. So usually it is a person of rank, a captain, a deputy chief, a chief, just because of the dealings that you might have with the public. And then, of course, as I said, your inspectors may be sworn personnel, meaning firefighters. I kind of hate that phrase, but I'm not sure how to differentiate. They may be sworn, as in firefighters that choose to go to prevention. As I've said, in some departments, you may have to do a tour in prevention in all the different administrative offices. And so that may be where you lie. This is another area where departments may employ civilians. And I think I know I've mentioned this in a video before, not sure what class it was, but the use of teachers, your K through 12 teachers in prevention as educators. Hello, they're educators. So they know how to do it best. They know how to teach. We just have to teach them what to teach. And the same thing's true with your building inspectors, your plans review people. They may be civilians as well. And so it's an easier place for civilians to get into the fire service and to serve in that arena. There is a professional standard, an NFPA standard for fire prevention officer, which is NFPA 1031, standard for professional qualifications for fire inspector and plans examiner. And then, of course, there's lots of training that you have to keep up. That was always my fear. I was an inspector. I was certified as an inspector. But if you don't stay current in the codes, if you don't stay current with publications and that kind of thing, it's real easy to miss something that has changed. So lots of different courses, National Fire Academy, the State Fire Academy, ways to get that training. So let's see. And looking at, again, in public, the same thing's true with public education, the same thing's true with investigations. There's lots of different public education courses, fire and life safety educator, community risk reduction specialist. Again, whatever that title might be, there's lots of different courses designed for that to get those certifications. There's IPQ certifications as well. So staying on top of these things is very important. So I would encourage you to do that. Now, some of the activities that take place within the Fire Prevention Bureau, again, is going to be as varied as the number of departments and the number of jurisdictions. The purpose of these activities, of course, is to prevent loss of life and property due to fire or injury. Many departments now, it's not just fire. We're not just preventing fire, but it's that fire and life safety educator, or we're looking for life safety code violations as well as fire code violations. So it's not simply just about fire now. It may be that we, when there is a big fire that seems to spur people to action. And so that may be true within the fire department and also within the community. Your book refers to the 4 areas in fire prevention activities of engineering, education, enforcement, and fire cause determination. These are, and you kind of have to keep these a little bit separate when we'll come across these again in a little different format, in a little different fashion. But the engineering aspect, that's your plans review. That is your making sure that they are up to date with that the assemblies and systems and equipment in that facility that is being built. Your education, of course, speaks for itself. And keep in mind too that fire and life safety educators are not the only educators. Inspectors educate. And I think many times as an educator, we can, or as an inspector, we say to somebody, keep this aisle clear. And they just think you're doing it because the code says. And if we can explain to them maybe how that code got there, or we can educate them on the importance of why this is important, then that also helps as well. So everybody's an educator. Everybody is an educator. There's some different fire prevention terms that you will run across. Those are your book speaks to those. And also within it, like a hazard, what is a hazard? What is a risk? We speak of target hazards. We think of the risk to the personnel, whether it's a high risk or a low risk. And then, of course, your occupancies. Again, we'll get into this a little bit later in some of the other courses. You have different occupancies based upon what's going on in this facility or in this structure. There might be places of assembly. You might have education, maybe have hazardous occupancies, or institutional occupancies such as jails, prisons, and group homes, maybe, that kind of thing. So a lot of that plays into our inspections. A lot of that plays into our prevention. There's a lot of different methods, as your book will speak to the methods of fire prevention. Fire prevention activities start before a structure is even built. Zoning regulations may dictate what can go there, what kind of facility. A high hazard facility may not be allowed in this low hazard neighborhood. And also when we think about construction of that building, think about access for fire apparatus placement and that kind of thing. And so all of this starts to take place before the building is ever built, the structure is ever built. And in the building construction class, we'll talk more about lightweight construction and how that has endangered the lives of firefighters and what some communities are doing about that, as far as that lightweight. Let's see, I'm going to zoom through some of this as your book will hit on this. I don't want to bore you too bad. The first step is to identify hazards that are inherent in a process. Maybe it's a manufacturing process, or what is going to be going on there? How many people are going to be there? What about parking? There's different ways that you can do that, different studies that you can do that as well. What kind of devices are going to be needed, whether this is manual, automatic fire extinguishing systems. What kind of, automatic shutoffs do you need? What kind of ventilation systems? And again, this gets into our fire protection systems course, where you will learn a little bit more about that. So there's a lot, when we talk about being an inspector, many of you may do pre-fire plans, which is a form of an inspection. Certainly you're not doing a formal inspection, but if you see some glaring issue, you need to let somebody know that can take care of that. But your pre-fire plans are a form of inspection where you're actually pre-planning that building in case there is an emergency there. Public education and public information, sometimes those go hand in hand. Your public education person is your public information officer. Other jurisdictions, they may be a totally different person. Your book says that presenting a fire safety message to an assembly at a school is one of the most effective forms of public education. I am going to disagree with that wholeheartedly. If any of you have ever done educational program in an assembly at a school, it is not the most effective to me, especially with younger children. We want a smaller group. I'll spend the day at the school going classroom to classroom. Then I would a whole lot rather do that and be effective and interact with those kids and have their attention than to have an assembly, be there an hour, and then say, we did a good job, didn't we? When we don't really have a clue what we did. So, different people do things a lot differently. Your book, again, references the Stop, Drop, and Roll program. This is a little dated. I never thought of it as a program. We have learned so much about how to make education, fire and life safety education and prevention education more effective educationally than over the past 10 years than I would have ever imagined. So you may be involved in your school programs. School programs are good. Don't let me mislead you in that. You have a captive audience. But don't forget about children that are homeschooled. And don't forget about those children that, don't do just, if you can avoid just doing one class, go several times over that school year. Your civic groups, station tours, those are very popular. Remember that you're not just touring the station, educational time as well. There's a lot of different tips that are given in the book for those of you that may not be fire and life safety educators. Just always remember that to make them age appropriate, and I would love to get into this more right now, but I would digress badly. Children, they like being allowed to spray water from the hose, according to your book. Some teachers frown on that. Some parents frown on that, especially if it's winter. So you just have to figure out what works for you. The book mentions having children try on turnout gear, articles of turnout gear. No, don't do that. One of the things that we have learned, when we're talking about this whole cancer problem within the fire service, that comes from our gear. And if we don't keep our gear clean for ourselves, don't let the little kiddies touch it. If you want to keep a set of gear that they can touch, that's clean and stays clean, it's never used, that's perfect. I would not allow them really to try it on per se, because it just gets into all kinds of issues. Some departments have purchased little kid-sized bunker gear, and you can let them try that on. But I do believe in the value of children seeing a firefighter in full turnout gear, breathing apparatus, the whole 9 yards. There is a lot of value to that. However, it has to be done very carefully and very slowly for those little children. We want to make sure that they do know what the firefighter looks like so that they're not afraid. So, other departments may have robots. There's clowning. There's puppets. There's a lot of interactive computer-based things that we can do now in the classrooms. So many of them have the smart boards that we can interact with. And so, again, don't forget that schools are easy, especially elementary schools. The kids love us. Don't forget about your junior high or your middle school kids and your high school kids, because they are just as important. There's also a way to educate through public service announcements. This may be an educational piece. This may be a warning about what to do when the floods come. It can be on local radio stations. It can be on television. Social media today has opened up the world for messaging. And so I would encourage you to take advantage of that as well. Let's see here. There are also I was looking to see if you live in an area where there's a lot of wildland fires, there's wildland education that needs to take place for homeowners. Of course, fireworks here in Georgia is another hotly debated issue. And your book gives you some tips on that. Company level prevention activities. This is really becoming huge. This is where the station-based risk reduction is, and there's actually a course by that name, is so important, where you look at, especially for larger jurisdictions, when you look at just that area, that your station district, who do you serve, and what are your calls? When I was with Hall County, there was a night and day difference between the south end of the county and the north end of the county. South was a little bit more urban and developed. The north was rural and farming. And so the issues were different in those parts of the county. So by doing company level data analysis at that station level and designing your own programs is certainly going to be very effective for you. The book goes on to speak about how you should approach inspections and some things that you want to consider. Again, your jurisdiction that may already have those things in place. But just remember, if you are that inspector or you're going out and with an inspector, which it may be a great activity for this course, and I'm going to think about doing that. Sorry, I hope that's okay with you guys. But to go out and watch as that inspector deals with people, handles violations or non-compliance. And you have to develop your own style is something that you have to do to think about that as well. And of course, investigations, determining the fire cause. To me, while it is very important in fire prevention, once we know the cause, we can help prevent it. People think about arson investigation. And while we want to know about arsons, that's not necessarily for a prevention standpoint. Maybe it is. I'm going to retract what I was going to say. You know, if you have an area where there's a lot of arsons occurring, you may want to increase your patrol with your law enforcement. You may want to do some kind of neighborhood watch type of an educational opportunity. So by determining the cause, it helps us know what to educate about. Many recalls of products have been based on fire investigations where they found a product to be faulty, and the Consumer Product Safety Commission was able to recall it. So I'm not going to get off into the investigations. I was an investigator for a bunch of years. I enjoyed that aspect of the job. One of the biggest things I enjoyed about it was talking to the people that experienced the fire to find out exactly what it was they were doing, how they reacted, because again, that helped me know how to educate others about this particular situation. So anything else that we do, we want to make sure that we do paperwork. You got to do reports. You got to document. Because again, this is going to lead to your budgeting. If you don't document the number of inspections, that's your evaluation piece. Not how many violations you find, how many violations are corrected. That's a great outcomes evaluation piece. And so you want to make sure that you document how many people you see, in what neighborhood, with your education programs, or what school, what age, so that if a fire comes along and you are at that school, you can figure out maybe where you went wrong. If it was maybe a child set fire, or where you went right because the people were able to escape. So fire prevention, I could go on for a very long time about this, but I'm going to cut it short. It is a passion of mine, and I believe that each one of us should find that passion and make it at least a part of our passion. Everybody loves to fight a fire. It's good old times, But as I tried to tell recruits at Hall County when I would teach, is that no one signs up for body recovery. Okay, I didn't. And I don't think anybody signs up for that. Rescue, yeah. But ask some of these firefighters how many people they've been able to rescue and how many they've had to recover. So when we think about fire prevention, you're never going to do away with all fires. Just get that out of your head. Fire prevention is, when we speak to ISO, the Insurance Services Office, fire prevention now gets brownie points. You get 5 points for doing community risk reduction. ISO is always given points for your inspections, or your pre-fire plans is a part of it, but now you get even more points. So that is something else to remember as well. Think about fire prevention and become involved with it, support it. You don't have to sign on to be that educator or that inspector unless you just really have that passion. But support those people in your department. Recognize what they do. And many times we don't see the results of what we do because it's really hard to measure what's been prevented. So tell them good job. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.